This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
Today, it is my honor and pleasure to have my guest, Bo Bennett, joining us. And one thing that Bo might not know or might not have recalled is that Bo and I have now been friends for right near 14 years. Bo and I met in 2006 during a time when I was going through a massive transition in the way I was looking at mental health, mental illness, and ways we might be able to affect a massive change in the world. And Bo was so instrumental in our connection back then. And since then, we've had several encounters, and I've kind of been watching Bo from the outside and the periphery, and we've even come together on a few occasions for business. And we've just been crossing paths in two ships in a night at times, and other times just really working together to make a difference in the world. So pleasure to introduce Bo Bennett to my listeners. So Bo is an entrepreneur, a programmer, a web developer, and a social psychologist. And he's also the author of over a dozen books, most of which are related to critical thinking and reason. He's an adjunct professor and teaches many online courses as well. And you can find out more about Bo, and he'll give you more information at the end of our talk today. Before we dive into today's conversation with Bo Bennett, I want to take just a minute to let you know that I just finished putting together the audiobook version of my soon-to-be-released book called The Creative 8. The book teaches a very simple method of healing that utilizes creativity and self-expression primarily. As a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I want to give you a completely free copy of this audiobook as a deep thank you for listening to the show. Go to welcometohumanity.net/creative. I've used the Creative Aid methodology for both my psychiatric patients and my coaching clients, and for several years, I've been getting just fantastic results. Guess what? The method takes less than 5 minutes a day to implement. I know you're going to love it. So download your free copy of the Creative Aid audiobook today at welcometohumanity.net/creative. Now, let's get back to our conversation with Bo Bennett. Welcome to humanity. Bo, it's just an honor and pleasure. Thank you for joining me this morning.
You bet. It's great to be here, Dr. Fred. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really, really great. It's so much fun to be able to use this technology. And, I recall a time, 2010 or 2009, or maybe it was even back in 2006, where my first podcast as a guest, I didn't even know what a podcast was, never had heard about it. You interviewed me with Ryan over your shoulder as a podcast guest. And I was like, oh, what? Whatever you want here, I'm in. And now it's become like an epidemic all over the world to do these podcasts. So that's what I recall. Do you remember that?
Oh, of course. I remember it. It was a lot of fun.
Exactly. And, Bo, when I think about you, I think that that's really the front edge that you find yourself most comfortable. Being on the front edge of a frontier of some sort of industry or ideas that no one has even thought about yet, that you're actually dancing in. And is that consistent with how you see yourself? Because I really see you as that level of visionary, a person who not only takes his vision, but actually jumps into it and then creates from the unknown something that's going to catch on in the world a few years later anyways. Is that how you see yourself?
Sometimes, and I appreciate that. But at times as well, I feel like I'm behind the times. But I think we all do that as well. In some areas, I definitely feel like, okay, I'm ahead of the curve. I'm ahead of the trends that are actually there. And it may be too soon. Where other things, I'm like, darn it, only if I did this a couple years ago. So there's always, it depends on what we're talking about. But for the most part, I like to think that I am a step ahead.
Awesome. So we're with my good friend and honorable guest today, Bo Bennett, talking about really a lot of different things. But Bo is an expert in critical thinking and reason. He's going to tell us a little bit now about some of the things that he's been up to recently and maybe some things that he's working on into the future. Bo, what are you up to? What's going on with you? And where are you active and where are you committed? Where is your energy being focused on these days?
Well, generally, since the beginning of the year, my priorities have been to take my entire web empire that I've built over the last 10, 15 years and just really clean it up. That has a lot to do with business. It has a lot to do with some of the extracurricular activities as well, including all of the teaching and the critical thinking and the reasoning. But together, I had before, like in December, let's say, over 50 different websites, all devoted trying to start something new. And of course, not everything always catches on. But if you have so many different things out there, some of them do work and some of them do work extremely well. So what I wanted to do this year, I wanted to do in 2020 was to take everything that I've built and just really clean it up, get rid of the crap that I'm not using, get rid of the stuff that people aren't really visiting and appreciating, and put all my energy and focus in those areas that I do feel are either profitable for business reasons or that have some really good benefit, public benefit in terms of like a lot of the writing I do and a lot of the free websites that I offer on critical thinking. So that's really what I've been focused on doing these last couple months. And I still probably have like another couple months to go before everything is actually in order the way I would like it to be.
Well, that sounds really exciting. It sounds like a super grand plan to kind of go through everything that has mattered to you for 10 or 15 years and everything that you've actually designed or created, and then actually determine which one of those are being utilized or which one of those might be effective or which one of those might be a massive contribution worth keeping, and then congealing these and making it, I suspect, giving it a capacity to be embraced as one or to be at least utilized in a way that's functional, like cleaning up a warehouse or cleaning up your virtual garage or
Right.
something of just an extraordinary amount of tools that you have laid out in front of you.
Right. And it's all about getting rid of the stuff, the wasted energy, and just putting all the focus and energy into the things that actually work. So not only is all the waste going to go away, but everything that is still there, I'm going to focus on and put more energy and more resources into so they could become even more successful than they already are.
So I know I'm speaking for my listeners. Are you coming up with any kind of trends, any things that you're noticing that either are surprising or, you're noticing the ones that are worth keeping have certain characteristics that are like each other? Or are there different, a couple, 3 different groups? Or what's making the cut is one way to understand it. What are the things that you're finding yourself choosing to keep as we move forward?
Well, once again, there are 2 general categories of what I do and the different websites that I have. One is business related, and the other category would be some kind of social benefit in dealing with critical thinking, reasoning, psychology. So in terms of business, it really is the practical services that people could actually use. And that makes sense if you think about it. There's so much crap out there, so much junk, and people don't have that much time. Everybody is competing for their time, whether it's television, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's free courses. There's tons and tons of content out there. And that's what you're essentially doing. You're competing for people's time. So it's ultra competitive, and you have to have an incredibly good product, something that offers a lot of value. So actually, you could take that whole concept and just put it towards what I do for businesses and what I do with the psychology and the reasoning as well. You just need to make sure that people are getting a heck of a lot out of it and they really appreciate it.
So thank you for that. That's really beautiful. What are you using for your measurement tools or your parameters that have something be seen as valuable enough to perpetuate?
In the business end, it's all about profit. It's all about not only how much money it's bringing in, but how much effort and time and how much expense it costs. You have to factor all of that in to realize what is actually worth it. And also, does something have some growth potential? I have a lot of little sites that are doing okay in terms of bringing in a little bit of revenue, but they're just a pain in the neck to maintain. So I had to make the difficult decision to get rid of some of the revenue and get rid of those sites because I knew there wasn't a lot of growth potential. In terms of the other sites, the sites that don't make money, of course, there's a different metric, but because we're not bringing in money. And I guess it's a little bit harder to measure when we're talking about that metric because it's really about feedback and it's about use, like how many people actually use the site, how many people post on the site, what kind of benefit they get from it. I always get feedback all the time from by email or different posts and so forth. So I take that in consideration too. So altogether, I just kind of make the judgment whether people enjoy the site or not based on how much it's being used and how much they actually like the site.
One thing as you speak, I have a question about the second form here, the social contribution and the metric being used for that, and really determining whether people are liking what you're laying down in that area. And then there's a third thing that I really wonder about for someone like you, which is the stuff that's out there that people don't yet know they're going to be interested in, that you have developed as a visionary, that's out there because you already see it coming clear. And even though people don't know that it's worthwhile or that they like it, they will soon. And it's worth keeping because you know that to be true. Is that a category worth paying attention to as we discuss this?
I would say yes, but with a caveat. I don't know anything. And although I like to pretend I'm that confident, over the years, I've learned a little humility in that the things I think that I know, it turns out that they really were just bad ideas that I never. So I approach that idea with a little bit of humility, and I say, you know what? I'm confident that something like this will take off. It just doesn't have the right marketing yet. It doesn't have the right exposure. Maybe the environment isn't ready for it. The culture isn't ready for it quite yet. But so I'll keep it out there. I'll put a little extra resource into it. I know it's kind of eating up some of my resources, but I'm confident enough that it soon one day will catch on. So yes, there certainly is a category there. But like I said, with a caveat that I'm not as confident as you might have made me sound.
No, I really, that's one thing I love about you, Bo Bennett, is that there is a humility behind your brilliance. And when I met you back in 2006, that's, believe it or not, the one thing I was most impressed with was your overwhelming brilliance. And I don't mean that not so much to just butter you up, because it's just simply a true factor of what it is to be Bo Bennett, is that your intelligence and your capacity to see what's important for humans inside of, some of your writings and how you speak and what you create, and what your commitments are, like who you are for the world around you, and even the businesses that you develop and the purpose for developing them, all takes advantage of just what it means to be Bo Bennett and living in Bo Bennett's shoes inside of the visionary characteristic, as well as your intelligence and your willingness and eagerness to make a contribution to humanity. How about that? Anything to say about any of that?
Well, I definitely appreciate that. Thank you. And anytime you want to butter me up, that's just fine. I'm always happy to listen to it.
Okay, awesome. That's great. I'll probably choose to go there one or two more times before the end of this call, and maybe after the call as well.
Awesome.
Depending on how you do on the call. So far, you're doing good enough, but we're really keeping track about how things are going on the call, about whether or not I'll be buttering you up ever again after the call. We'll see how things go.
Fair enough.
Okay, cool. So when I talk about like what it is that you do, and one of the things we talked about in your bio is that you're a social psychologist, and I know that you're really proud of that degree. I know that it's something that you cherish, and it's something you often even lead with when describing what you're up to. And so, Bo, can you tell us some of the things that matter to you in the world of what it means to be a human these days? Or what is social psychology for Bo Bennett? What is that envelope?
Right. Well, social psychology is basically about human relations and how our lives are shaped by the lives of other people around us. And I feel like there's this overall idea that we are alone in some sense, that each one of us is in complete control of our own destinies, if you want to call it that. And we could do anything, and it's not shaped by other people. But that's not the case. And social psychology tells us that. It tells us how important other people are to us. And I know there are two sides to this coin, and I always struggled this as well. I used to be, Dr. Fred, as you know, a motivational speaker. I used to get paid professionally to go into different companies and businesses and start talking about, give them the rah-rah stuff and how great life is and how they could do anything they want to do. So I was conflicted by this because in a sense, I really am still that type of guy that, you could do anything you want. You really got to put your mind to it. But in another sense, especially since my education and pursuit down that path, I really began to realize, like asking the questions, how come? I see a lot of very motivated people. I see a lot of people that seem to have that drive, but they just don't quite make it, or they're not happy, or they're just not happy with life. So what's going on? And that really did introduce me and start pushing me towards looking at the forces around us that shape our lives. And those forces are other people. And the reason why this is so important, Dr. Fred, is because by knowing this, we are the change in other people's lives. So when you have an individual who you see struggling, or somebody who's depressed or not happy, clinically depressed, but just not really embracing life, not getting where they want to be, it's not as easy as just telling them, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get out there and go make your mark in the world. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes people need support. Sometimes people need help. They need friends. They need somebody to be a motivating factor in their lives. And it's these social influences that shape the ideas, the ideology, the drives of other people. And once you realize that you could have such a great influence on other people, then it makes you even more empowered. Not the kind of empowered that you had before, maybe that you didn't realize this when you thought you could do everything yourself. But now it's just not about helping you. It's about you helping everybody else. And if everybody had even just a sense of this idea that they are such a major influence in other people's lives, and doing the tiniest thing could set somebody on a different course, it's just a very empowering idea. And I think it's very important that people understand this as well. And that's what social psychology is about, basically.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. I am hearing something here as well, which is that by no means are you speaking simply to professionals, to people who have committed their lives to helping others. Everyone from social workers to counselors to therapists to psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. People who have all even made it their life's profession to help people. Although this would be useful for them, I hear you speaking to every single human being.
That's it. Yeah, it's everybody. It's not just those people. And you don't realize how much you could change somebody's life by just saying something nice to them. When they're in a bad position, a bad shape, whatever, just giving them a nice comment, being kind, just doing an act of kindness, whatever. Something small like that could really change the trajectory of somebody's life. And it could motivate them to help other people as well, and to do kind things for other people.
Yeah, that's just so the fact that we're social beings and we live in this lattice of, 7.8 billion people that are really in some ways one unit, and thereby each and every one of us affecting each and every other one of us. It's like an overwhelming thought. But the truth is, when we do make impacts by saying something kind or random acts of kindness, or maybe just listening to another person authentically or radically, hearing what it is that is going on with someone, whether they're either troubled or even when they're doing well, the impact of this is so extraordinary that it really alters the framework of what we might think as our own personal insignificance.
Yeah. Yeah, well put.
It's really, really beautiful stuff. I'm so glad that you're doing that. But when you became a social psychologist a little later in your life, what is that right?
Yes.
When did you get your degree?
I got my degree. Oh, geez. And maybe I got my doctorate 4 years ago, maybe. Yeah, 4 years. Well, actually,
Okay.
I was teaching for 3 years. So like 5 years ago, maybe. Let's just say call it 5 years ago.
Okay. So you got your doctorate 5 years ago. And in the process of learning, of training, of reading, of, being out in the field and becoming a true blue social psychologist, what kind of things outside of your websites, maybe outside of your profound impact in the world of virtual communication, where have you noticed yourself being most effective in the community?
Outside of the websites.
Maybe not outside. I don't want to pigeonhole you to outside of the website, because I think so much of our work these days is done on the
Right.
web. So it's like maybe the question is more, what kind of global impact are you noticing with your shifting view of what it means to be a human with other humans?
Right. Well, I would say there are two aspects to that. One is the websites, and that's kind of a given with all the people that I come in contact with. The websites obviously are global. I work with people all over the world. It's really an interesting, I guess, endeavor working with these people and understanding their cultures, their beliefs, how they were brought up, how they see the world given their current culture. And, you name it, people from all different countries all over the world. It's great when we kind of all get together surrounding the same thing, what, we all have in common, no matter if we have different religions, no religion, different political beliefs. We all share the idea of truth, of reason, of critical thinking. It's this common denominator that we can all share, no matter where we all come from it. And I think that's been a wonderful thing to explore that. And that definitely helped me. Like, I've been running the site for the site called Logically Fallacious, where I answer about 100 different questions every month, and when work with people, constantly chatting with people and evaluating arguments and so forth. And that's been going on for years, so almost a decade. It's been a great way to increase my mental database, if you want to call it that. On the other end of things, outside of the web, I work with students. I was an adjunct professor at LaSalle University for over 3 years. And working with the students, it's not global in the sense that it's in one town in Massachusetts, but it is global in the sense that the effect that I have on them will ultimately spread to the effect they have on other people and so forth to get to the point where it is actually global.
Right. So like the ripple effect you're speaking towards, that if you affect one person who then goes global, you most definitely had an impact on the global directly.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you speak towards sort of the common denominator, or that it all in some ways dissolves down to each and every individual or so-called individual, this lattice of 7.8 billion that we call individual.
Right.
It's like the truth. You mentioned truth, reason, and critical thinking as being something that we all share in how we move forward in the world. Can you tell us a little bit more about, this is an area of life that matters a lot to you. I know that. And so can you give us a little bit about what you're noticing when you see that, even if they're from different cultures, different religions, different, economic situations or anything like that, what we as humans share certain characteristics. And it sounds like you boiled it down, at least in no small part, to truth, reason, and critical thinking.
Right. And I should clarify that. I should say it's the desire for truth. It's the desire to be reasonable. It's I guess, the understanding that the closest we can get to something called truth, we need to approach it in a similar way. And that way we call the reasoning process. And that is something that we all share. I mean, we can agree on like the basic rules of logic, the basic rules of reason. And we all understand that A equals A is true. And, you can't have A and not A at the same time. So like the basic laws, it's like these foundational understandings help us to act as a starting point where we can just take like basically any issue that you wanted to take and really look into that and come to the best solution, the best conclusion using this kind of methodology, if you want to call it that. And that's kind of what critical thinking is about. And it's about exposing the fact that we are flawed beings in the sense that our brains were not evolved for reason. We evolved with the idea or the goals of living and reproducing. And that's it. In terms of nature, that's what nature cares about. It wants us to reproduce, and it wants us to continue living, or at least continue living long enough until we reproduce and pass our genes on. That's what it's about. And that's how like our brains have developed and evolved in such a way to facilitate those goals specifically. So there's a lot of what's called cognitive biases that we have, ways of seeing the world and understanding things that once we understand what a cognitive bias is, we say, oh yeah, of course that happens to me. It happens all the time, but we don't realize it because we don't really think about it well enough. They're basically, cognitive biases are like optical illusions for the brain. Everybody knows what an optical illusion is. And we see something like, oh, it's completely different than what we thought it was. And that's what a cognitive bias is. Like the confirmation bias is a common one. Confirmation bias can be defined in many different ways, but one of the most prevalent aspects of the confirmation bias is our desire to, at least in today's society, our desire to look up information that already agrees with our belief system.
Exactly.
So and we see this all the time with people on the right, they're like Fox News and that's it. I don't want to hear from any of those other networks. And people on the left say, oh, geez, I don't even want to hear from Fox News. Give me CNN or PBS and whatever. And that's a perfect example of that, because we just want the information that makes us feel good. We don't like what's called cognitive dissonance. We don't like the idea when we have two conflicting ideas like, oh, geez, wait, if this is true, then my long-held belief can't also be true. And now that makes us cognitively uncomfortable, and it causes dis-ease in us. Not disease, but dis-ease.
Dis-ease.
Right. Yeah. So in order to avoid that, we tend to take these mental shortcuts and just keep thinking in such a way that just keeps us comfortable. And that's a big problem. But if you understand critical thinking, if you understand the foundation of cognitive biases, of logical fallacies, you can not only use that information to look at any argument, and not just, and when I say argument, I don't mean a formal argument where you have to have premises, conclusion, but basically any claim that anybody makes. Anything you hear on the news, anything you read on the web, and you could take that information and you could apply it, and you could determine, okay, well, I see now how badly this is flawed and how wrong this is. And basically what you're doing is you're becoming smarter by applying these rules, and you're getting better information. You are learning more of what is true, and you're starting to unlearn and not be attached to or not believe the things that you once believed that are false. So it's a process, and it's not an overnight process. It's a lifetime process. But I strongly believe it's the best process that one could take. And one of the reasons I like this so much is because I thought before there was a time when I was all about, well, maybe I should focus on religion and I should focus on that, and kind of going through all the arguments with religion and trying to convince people of whatever. And then I said, well, how about politics? Politics is more important, so maybe we should be doing that. Or how about some social issues? But what it turns out, the common denominator on all of this, again, is critical thinking. It's reasoning process. If you know how to think critically, if you know how to reason well, if you know some basic laws of logic, and if you use that as a starting point, everything else falls into line. And you're not going to come up with everything right all of the time. There's no way that that's going to happen, but you are going to be in a much better position to get to the right answer more often than not.
Thank you so much. That's just beautiful and brilliant in its notion. I just have some, as you speak, I still get something, and I'm sure you can speak to this. This idea of starting somewhere is so critical when we're thinking or trying to put together some sort of sense out of what our human experience is about. And what I hear you positing is in the world of really just getting a basic laws of logic, like A equals A, or, A and not A can't be in the same place at the same time, or those kinds of things. Like basic reasoning and basic critical thinking is a place to start from, and to expand when evaluating all claims and arguments that anyone makes about anything that has the possibility of upending previously conceived or previously thought of notions being up for grabs and all the time, like being transformable all the time. Things that I might have thought to be so up until today are better. I should hold them out there to at least be available to the possibility that it isn't what I thought it was. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think that's great. And you touched on one other thing that's very important, and that's confidence level too. Once you really study, I don't even want to say like you have to professionally study or academically study cognitive psychology, but if you even understand the basics of cognitive psychology and understand the biases, for all of your listeners, go to Wikipedia, type in cognitive biases list, or just go to the Google, and the first thing that'll come up will be the Wikipedia page with about 200 to 300 different cognitive biases.
Wow.
Just go through that, spend 10 minutes and start reading those and say, holy crap, I cannot believe on how much we are deceived, how much our brain deceives us on these basic things. And you could say, oh yeah, okay, I could do that. You start reading these and you say, this happens to me all the time. And once you understand that, like humility is completely redefined, because you understand that that when you think you're right, the chances are you're probably not, or there's something wrong, and your confidence level for things definitely gets to be more realistic. You don't speak anymore in absolutes, and you don't say, I'm right and you're wrong and this is the way it is, but you approach your reasoning and your argumentation and your discussions, everything, with a lot more humility, where you understand how flawed our brain is and the reasoning process and how easily you could be wrong. Maybe this is off a different subject, but one of the things that I'm impressed most about when I hear politicians talk, when they say, yeah, I was wrong, and they correct themselves. They say, yes, I was wrong when I said that because I got new information and I didn't have that information at the time, but now I do. And based on this new information, well, of course, it makes sense to change my mind. If everybody said that, if every politician said that, wow, that one little thing, having that understanding, it's not only humility too. I'm sure there's something in politics where if you change your mind, you're seen as a flip-flopper. And the general public doesn't understand. And there's some truth to that, because if you really have uh, I guess politics in a sense, where you're just kind of going with what everybody else says, and you're jumping from one thing to another. Well, yeah, that's kind of like flip flopping. But really, if you didn't know something before and you know something now, if you have new information and you continue not to change your mind and stick with that old information, well, you're doing yourself, and if you're a public servant, everybody else, a great disservice.
A great disservice indeed. And I find that same phenomena inside my work as an expert witness, where I'm given some degree of finite information, sometimes, excessive finite information with the assignment to take apart a case and learn what happened or what didn't happen, who's liable and who's not liable, what was the cause versus what were some correlations
Right.
versus, those kinds of things. And then new information might come in after my deposition, between deposition and trial, that really actually fundamentally alters that which I said was so with the amount of information I had prior. And I'm left really holding the bag like, okay, what am I supposed to do now with new information that has me actually alter my own truth as I approach trial and having to raise my right hand and speak the
Right.
truth and nothing but the truth? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? And I think what you're saying is that's just a phenomena that happens to each and every one of us every single day when we get new information. And if we were honest with ourselves, we could alter what we knew was so to a new level of knowing, given new information that has entered the scene. Yeah.
Yes, but the one caveat there again is, if you do have these cognitive biases, the confirmation bias, then you don't allow yourself to get that new information, or you dismiss the new information. I mean, you hear it, you read it,
right? Like faulty source or something. Call it a faulty
but
source.
yeah, exactly. Fake news, whatever. Like you don't even consider it, because you understand that if that were true,
then everything
then
I
that would
thought before
exactly
would be challenged or false, or I'd have to
right. And sometimes it would have to radically change your worldview, radically change how you live, how you understand yourself and your position and your place in this world. And it's just too much for many people to handle.
Oh my goodness.
That it's just, you forget about it. It's not worth it.
I got it. Well, in my world as a psychiatrist, and now backing off to the world of, non-diagnosing or pre-diagnosing psychiatrists, I run across that particular phenomena. It appears, other people have it. I don't have it. I just want to make that clear. I'm devoid of what it is that you're talking about. Most of what I think is actually so. And I think it's been proven over and over again by my experience that most of what I think is actually so. Can we just accept that?
There you go. You're learning well, Dr. Fred.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. And so, the next thing I really want to get is, now we're on with Bo Bennett. Bo Bennett is an extraordinary social psychologist who I met about 14 years ago and has agreed to come on. Really, it's my honor to have Bo coming on for our podcast today on February 28th, 2020. And we're talking about a lot of different things, but we're really also talking primarily about Bo's interest and his commitment in the world of reason and critical thinking. And we've been exploring a lot of different ideas in our first 35 minutes together. So let's take on a few more. Is that okay, Bo? We'll take on a few more.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. The next thing I want to ask you, I think on the tail of what you just said, these paradigm shifting things that happen over time, that, there's some classic ones, of course, with Copernicus or with Magellan or with Einstein, the people who prior to their existence, we thought something. And then after they did their work, we thought something completely different and now know that to be true. And
Right.
we live with that as if that is true. So that the earth revolves around the sun, or that it's actually a round and not flat earth, or that, whatever the theory of relativity might have contributed to how we think things are going, how we think things go now, has fundamentally altered the way we look at the world as humans. And by doing so, really has altered many other things that seemingly are unrelated to whether or not the world is round, et cetera.
Right.
Did you notice any time in your last 5 years? And now I want to make it very clear to my listeners that I did not prime you about this question. So there's not we don't have a set answer for this question. We'll see how Bo handles it. But basically, did you notice anything that you really absolutely knew positively to be true up until, let's say, 2015 when you were, getting your degree, or up in maybe the last decade, that through your work inside of critical thinking and becoming a social psychologist whose specialty is this area of critical thinking and reason, can you bring up something to us that you actually knew to be true that you now either know isn't true or know that the opposite is true and not what you thought? Is there anything that happened to you personally?
With that level of confidence, no. I think I've always been on the spectrum of confidence as opposed to 100% knowing versus not knowing. So I see everything as being on that scale. Like, how confident are you? And in philosophy, they talk about the difference between knowing something and believing something. And it's not very clear. And depending on which philosopher you read and who you ask, you're going to get a different reason. But the overall consensus, if there is one, an understanding of the difference between knowledge and belief is that belief is there's less confidence in the belief, and there's nothing that could back it up demonstrably. There may be some like evidence, but there's not something, it's like unfalsifiable. Whereas in terms of knowing something, when you say I know something, you're very high up on that confidence level. Some people say like 100%, they're 100% confident. I would never, ever say that about anything. And I don't think I ever did. I always had some.
Are you 100% sure that you never did?
No, absolutely not. Right.
Okay.
Right. There's always this level of probability that comes with everything that I think I know. So to answer your basic question, there was nothing that I was that confident that I would say I'm 100% positive or I know for sure. In terms of different ideas that have changed, on the spot, I can't think of anything in particular that was that drastic, but I know there were a lot of little things that I began to understand more. And I think the biggest thing, like I said before, was the fact that my level of confidence in everything has went down to what I believe is a much more reasonable degree, just based on understanding the human psyche and how things are processed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Beautiful. So, Bo, one of the questions we like to ask our guests is that you've already danced around it pretty significantly, but we'll see if we can milk this for even a more precise answer. Is that, like, what's going on in the world that really bothers you? Like, what's going on in the world right now that, you're moved to make a difference in, that you live, that for you, you wish that you could fix it or resolve it or change it, alter it, transform it. Is there any specific thing that you would list as your number one area that's really, or right up there on the top of the list of things that are just bugging you about the way things are going?
Yeah, it would be lack of critical thinking and poor critical thinking. I mean, that is what I definitely feel is the source of a lot of these problems that we have today. And without getting political, I would say that there's this guy that's on TV a lot and on Twitter a lot, and
yeah, I think I know some of this guy.
and says a lot of things that are like blatantly not true.
Yeah.
And if you even use like the tiniest bit of reason and critical thinking and fact checking, people would know. And what bothers me so much is not that people don't know what he's saying is untrue. Because I really do believe that a lot of people say, yeah, but he's a politician and all politicians say things like that. Justification, rationalization. I mean, these are all, again, cognitive processes.
Yeah, don't let the facts get in your way. Yeah.
And what bothers me most is the lack of caring. It's this, I guess it's this allegiance to ideology as opposed to an allegiance to truth and facts.
Isn't that great? Oh.
And this is what drives me nuts, and just not caring anymore about truth, about things that are true. And it's that indifference and I guess the cult-like behavior that really drives me nuts. The scientific illiteracy and distrust that people have in the process, the inability to distinguish fact from fiction, and also the whole idea of the ease of being manipulated. If you understand psychology, and even if you read through that list of cognitive biases, you don't have to have a PhD in psychology to know this. You could easily see the techniques and once again, also read different logical fallacies in addition to cognitive biases, you could see the techniques that people use to manipulate other people, that people use for persuasion techniques. Persuasion versus manipulation, what's the difference? Well, it depends on your perspective, right? It depends on, some people could say that, manipulation is for nefarious purposes or something, but according to whom? Maybe manipulation, according to a certain person, is for good reason. So I don't like to really draw a distinction between those two. The important thing is people can really get you to believe and think and act pretty much, I won't say any way that they want you to, but they could influence your beliefs and your behavior a heck of a lot just simply by knowing some basics of psychology. And if people knew this, it's kind of like opening up the secret door, pulling up the curtain and seeing the wizard pulling the strings. And if people just knew these basic things, they would be able to detect when people are manipulating them. My friend Ryan, which and we did this podcast a while back called Real Marketing Bull, and that was a lot of fun. This was like one of my first forays into critical thinking. What we did, it was about probably like 10 years ago we did this podcast. We were just so sick of all the marketing bull crap that was going around, the techniques that they used. So what we really did is we dove into it, and we would expose these different ideas, and we would just do it in a fun manner. And it was a really interesting, and I think for anybody who was listening, it was interesting way to see how businesses manipulate us in order to buying their products, buying more of their stuff. But it doesn't end there. It's everywhere, in politics, in religion, in the world around us. It's everywhere. And if you know the techniques, you could spot it and say, okay, I know what's going on here. And then you become a little bit better at skepticism, and then you can just make better decisions overall. So I think if that's kind of the big problem that bothers me today, and I really hope that people will take the initiative to start learning more about this and just say, I don't want to be manipulated. I understand that this is happening. I understand that people are doing this to me, and I don't want to be. I want to be free of this manipulation and to see things a little bit more clearly. And I hope that people wake up and start to feel that and believe that.
Mm-hmm. That's fabulous. I am very moved by what you're saying. And given the earlier part of our conversation, I think there's a general focus in who you are, really paying attention to the impact that people have on other people. And that can be impact in multiple different directions. But given the first half of our conversation, when we were speaking to, that we are not individuals, that we are actually individuals completely adjustable or completely dependent or interdependent on each other. And even small responses to our pain can alter the trajectory of our life on a fundamental scale. We also get in this way that as individuals affected by those around us, we have to be a little bit diligent or even vigilant or even careful, even cautious, at least be able to assess at some level using critical thinking and reasoning what it is we're hearing from others so that we can make proper decisions, at least decisions that pay attention to the things that matter to us. In this case, maybe truth should be one of those, or maybe, sometimes I've heard it split up into truth and beauty and goodness, but the eternity, like really making a difference in another person's life, is both a miraculous phenomena and a phenomena worth paying attention to with respect to the possible danger.
Right. Well said.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, that's really, really cool. So what can we do? I mean, Bo, look, let's say you had your finger on the joystick of this whole game called life. And I've never used that phrase before, but I kind of like it. What if, let's say that was the way it was going? What would you instruct us to be able to do, either as a functional group of intellectual academics, or really taking it down to just general public? What can people do so that we can, find ourselves digging into more about how to determine what matters to us, what's truthful about what matters to us, and how we can help the people around us or ourselves live a more useful life, a life that matters more.
Right. Well, in general, I think it boils down to teaching people how to think as opposed to teaching them what to think. And this could play out in academia as well as in personal lives and parenting. In academia, there's a lot of content-based instruction. And I know this is necessary for a lot of different subjects, but not for every subject. And I think that academia needs to be changed. And I'm not just talking about college level, but K through 12 and all the way up. We need a different process. We need to really incorporate a lot more critical thinking. We need to encourage questions. We need to encourage challenging of different ideas,
Mm.
challenging of professors and teachers. And,
Well,
well, why is
that's
it
a
this
little
way?
radical.
It is.
I think I'm trying to stay within the realm of possible reality, but I mean, challenging.
I feel my Bernie Sanders coming out with my radical ideas. uh,
That's pushing it. Yeah, that's pushing
yeah,
it.
and
So,
but even like in parenting, and that's the way we tried to raise our kids too. We didn't want to. We tell them kind of like what we believe, and then we
yes.
challenge them. Say, well, what do you think this is right? Why not? And here is what other people believe. Educating them into the world of different ideas and beliefs out there, and different religious and political beliefs. The last thing we want to do is we don't want kids just parroting what we believe, because we could be wrong. It's not. It's always about like the process of how they come to the answer, how they come to believe what they believe. It's that process that's so important. And if you rob people of that process by just telling them what to believe, of what to think, then that's what you're doing. You're robbing them of the process, and you're robbing them of the critical thinking skills that they need to build in order to come to those conclusions themselves. So we can encourage more of that type of thinking, teaching people how to think as opposed to what to think.
Beautiful. So, Bo, I have a question about this. Are we really actually getting, if we were to utilize this methodology on a more pervasive scale, if more of us were using, do you feel like we would get closer to an actual truth, or do you actually feel what we would get closer to is realizing that we have no chance to get close to a truth?
Well, it depends what you mean by truth. Again, if we're looking at like philosophical truth, like what's the meaning of life, the purpose of the universe, like these kind of truths, they're very interesting in religious or philosophical debate. But in terms of living life, in terms of running a country, in terms of doing well, being happy, increasing your own well-being, doing well in business, these things really don't matter too much. But the kind of truths are the kind of truths that I might be referring to here is more the demonstrable kind of truths. Like, is this a fact or is it not a fact? Is this something that can be demonstrated? Is this something that can be proven? When you have 97% of the scientists in the world who has spent the last 30 years of their lives studying one particular thing, and they all tell you the same thing, and you say, that's a bunch of crap, I don't believe that. Well, what do you believe and why? Well, because this politician told me something different. Okay.
Yeah.
Think about your methodology there. It's like, okay, so when do we ignore 97% of the scientists? These kind of truths are not truths with a capital T. They're not the kind of unquestionable, unshakable truths that somebody may hold to in a religious belief or a philosophical belief even. It's the kind of truth that we could demonstrate through the reasoning process, through the critical thinking process. And we could definitely get to it. And we could say with an incredible amount of confidence that this is true. And if you don't believe it, well, you're wrong. Everything is not subjective. Everything is not a matter of opinion. You can't create your own truths. There are things that are true and things that are not true, and ways that we could figure these things out. And the thing that always bothers me most is if you speak to anybody who completely rejects a truth, and you probably know there's an entire organization out there called the Flat Earth Society that completely just reject the whole idea of the flat Earth, of the spherical Earth. And if you talk to any one of them or listen to them, if you don't bring up the Earth, you will listen to them, and they reason just like we do.
They do. You're right.
They'll look both ways before crossing the road. They understand how gravity works. I mean, they don't understand how gravity works, but in a sense, they know if they step off a building, they're going to fall down. So they understand like the basic rules, and they have this blind spot, this compartmentalization, we call it in psychology, where you're completely functioning at one level for everything else except for this one topic.
Interesting.
This one idea that you have such this strong ideological hold that you just can't let go, and nothing can penetrate that. It's like impenetrable in this little compartment in your mind. Nothing gets in, the facts and everything bounces off, but everything else in your life is just fine. And it's like if we understood this too, and we understood this about ourselves, and yeah, this is human, this is normal, this is how we work, because of the kind of discomfort that could come from these things, we would be on that better track that would put us all in a better position when we all agree what is actually true is true. We're going to be much better off as a society.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. So some of these things, some of the things that have been subject to paradigmatic shifts over time, where the 3% or even the 0.5% or even the 0.001% is actually accurate, and the others, don't yet see the light on what's so, things that have happened over time, some of the more famous ones that we've already referred to,
Right.
and others, those become more remarkable, even so, when you start looking at evidence-based ways of thinking versus rogue thinking, or thinking outside of the box, or thinking that doesn't take into consideration that which everybody else so-called knows. How do these things take place, these paradigmatic shifts?
Well, this is interesting because there's a logical fallacy called the Galileo fallacy. And this is the idea that you'll have, let's say, a flat earther approach you and say, well, yeah, I know you're making fun of me because 99.99% of all the people believe in this. And yes, I'm part of the minority, but look at Galileo. He was the minority, right, and he was right. So therefore, every batshit crazy idea is right. Sure. It's this whole idea, and that's called the Galileo fallacy. Okay. It's just associating yourself with like the 1 in a million chance that someone was right one time when it was absolute minority, versus the almost statistical certainty that you're going to be wrong if you have this like one crazy idea. But there's also something to talk about, like the scientific paradigms. There is that one crazy idea that is the idea that completely shifts things, our way of thinking, our way of understanding human behavior, our way of understanding the world. There are those people out there, and there are those ideas out there that really do make the shift. And one thing about the scientific paradigms is that a lot of people that aren't really familiar with the scientific process kind of misunderstand from this, is they will use that as well, that this whole idea of the paradigm shifts and incorporating the Galileo fallacy to say, well, just look at science and how many times it changed its mind before, like science has a mind. But they'll point to that and say, therefore I'm right, or therefore I'm probably right. Again, which we know is fallacious. Scientific paradigms are usually that way. And when we find out something new and different, it's usually building upon something that we already know and something that we've already discovered. And it's like very rarely does something like, at least in the last 400 years, when we really started implementing the scientific methodology to understand the world and the way we know it. Like, for example, when we knew that the earth wasn't flat, we're like, okay, hey, now it's round, or now it's a sphere. And then that didn't change, but it became a spherical obloid, meaning that when you look at the poles, it's pulled a little bit on the poles. So it's not a perfect sphere, but it's a little bit kind of like oblong. So that changed our idea. It wasn't a sphere anymore, but it updated it. It became a little bit more accurate. We could look at our understanding of evolution as well. And that's the same thing. Like when we first understand how life began to evolve, we had kind of like a basic understanding. Everything we learned on top of that, it just kind of focused it a little bit more, filled in some of the gaps that we didn't know. So like a true scientific paradigm, like if it's almost a certainty, again, I'm not going to say it's certain, I won't say anything certain, but it's almost a certainty, so that's never going to get wiped out and say, okay, something completely different. It's never going to get wiped out that the earth is a spherical obloid or something like that. Like it's not going to be something completely crazy different. The scientific paradigms that we see today and the paradigm shifts, a lot of it is in the area like your field, or the area of psychology, the area of understanding, the understanding of human behavior, because a lot of what was established is kind of like a model for the way we understand things, as opposed to something that's physical, something that we could use, that we can measure.
Mhm.
So, like in the social sciences, we have a little bit more flexibility there, and we see different ways of looking at things. Like people will say that Freud was a paradigm shift with the
Mhm.
way that he understood things. And then you have like the behavioralist, and that was
Mhm.
kind of a paradigm shift in a way. So there are new ways of looking at things. And yes, we can look back at Freud today, and as you know, like a lot of he was like a crazy cocaine guy, and a lot of things that he said really don't apply today. But a lot of the things that he did say, they still hold a lot of water and weight today as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's really interesting when we talk about paradigm shifts, because in a sense, some things are unlikely to change from what we know. But in another sense, some things, especially more in the social sciences, we can see some major changes or different ways of looking at things.
Mhm. Exactly. Super cool. All right. Well, it seems like, again, pointing to one more piece, there's like depending on how far upstream you go to challenge a particular foundational idea that many things have grown from, that increases the likelihood of a possible paradigmatic shift. If you go backwards, 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 and then you find a particular fact that everything has been built from because it has been thought to be so, and it turns out to be challengeable or in fact false, then everything that flowed downstream from that becomes, of course, altered as a result, at least in my linear way, my binary way of thinking inside of space and time continuum. So before we go too far along that line and create our next podcast, because we really could speak to this towards infinity. And I'm on with Bo Bennett. Bo is a good friend of mine and a colleague who has really been committing himself, really declaring himself and dedicating himself to making a difference in the world of social psychology, and doing so using virtual technology as well as human behavior research and education in ways that we can all help each other live on this planet a little more peaceful, a little bit more truthfully, a little bit more socially acceptably, a little bit more really. And that's who I'm on with today is Bo Bennett. We've had an extraordinary conversation this morning, now turned to afternoon here in Los Angeles, California, where I am. So, Bo, let's speak again, and let's speak again soon, and we can do another podcast. And I'm guessing our listeners will ask us for another one anyway. So let's make that happen. Is there anything you want to say in closing with this particular conversation? Anything you said that you either want to change now that there's new information, or anything you want to back off of, or anything you want to declare as being actually truthful, or anything you want to say about how the conversation went for you?
Give me that option a year from now. I'll listen to this again. We'll do some editing. We might have to do some editing, but no. Overall, pretty happy with the way things went. I think it was a good conversation. That's about it.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Why don't you tell my listeners or our listeners about how they can reach you, and if there's anything they can do, if they want to like follow you, or if they want to just maybe touch base with you, ask you a question, join up with you, at least have an idea of maybe they could learn from you, and maybe who knows what kind of content they might want. How, if someone was interested in legitimately learning more about what Bo Bennett is up to, or joining forces from you, how might they do that, Bo?
Just go to bobennett.com. It's that simple. Yep. That's my author website, where you'll find all of my books. You'll be able to order any of the books. You'll be able to see my courses. You'll be able to jump around, ask me questions. You'll be able to see the websites from there. Yeah, that's a good way to get into my life in a non-creepy way.
That's fabulous. So Bo is actually my entryway into anything like what we're doing here today. I think I said earlier that my first podcast many years ago was in Bo's, I think it was in your basement or some studio near your home 14 years ago. And your capacity to build extraordinary websites, we somehow got through this conversation without mentioning that. And what you did for me back in 2006, I'm just continually and always grateful for who you've been in my life. So
thank you. I appreciate that,
man. And yeah, so with that, it's just been a pleasure. It really has. It's been a fabulous conversation. I hope to continue it soon. It's really fun to catch up with you and to hear where you're at on any given day, knowing that tomorrow could change with respect to new information flooding in
Very good.
now and then. So thank you for being on the podcast. Dr. Fred Moss. I'm the founder and creator of Welcome to Humanity, among other things. And we're out to really take a look at the way mental health and mental illness is dealt with and cared for around the world, and different alterations of that might be useful, as well as what might be so or not so, as Dr. Bennett mentioned during this conversation. Bo, thanks for being with us. Thanks for everyone else who helped with produce. Ryan Levesque, our mutual friend, has been in the background this entire call. Isn't that beautiful that he's been with us? Thanks for doing that, Ryan. Thanks for being on the call, Bo Bennett.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. You know, something I really, really loved about the interview with Bo Bennett is his just utter brilliance. This is a man who's academic in nature and just so human at the core. I really, really appreciate that about him. I appreciated what he said about intellect, and what he said about people in general, and how we think and how we act, and what we can know and what we don't know about how people are and what they do. An insight that really struck me from today's show was that when talking to someone about these topics, we can always get to a space where neither of us know and then move on from there. Perhaps as you were listening, you thought of a person, or maybe even 2 or 3 people, who need to hear this episode. So why not reach out to them right now and invite them to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And speaking of subscribing, I'd like to ask a favor of you that is small in effort, though really, really big, as far as impact for me and the show, and for the people around you. First, could you please take a moment to hit the subscribe button on your podcast player? And then that way, you'll get the latest episodes as they become available. Secondly, if you actually appreciate what we're doing here, could you just take 5 minutes to leave a review on the Apple Podcast? I surely would appreciate it. Subscribes and reviews are 2 major ways we can reach more listeners with the Welcome to Humanity podcast. If the conversations we're having here contribute to your life, please play it forward by subscribing and leaving a review. I and my team, as well as the people in your life, would truly be grateful for your support. And to catch up on past episodes, head on over to welcometohumanity.net/podcast. Until next time, this is Dr. Fred, and it's been the Welcome Humanity podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. You see, your relationships, the areas of your relationship where you're being inauthentic or holding back on your truth, are toxic. You know that. You know there's those things you're not saying that you wish you would say, and that if you could get it across, it would alter your relationships in a positive direction. Imagine if the truth could really be spoken. Your truth, your true voice. Now, the truth is, you're an influencer right now. You cannot not be an influencer, even if you have no followers on social media, even if you don't have $1 million. The people that are in your world are influenced by you. I invite you to bring a level of authenticity, an incremental increase in your level of authenticity in all of your relationships, and watch and listen to the applause. Hello, my name is Dr. Fred Moss, and I'm here with my co-host, my wonderful good friend, Sam Morris. We're the Wizard and the Warrior, and we're here to present to you this new podcast called Insanity. That's 2 words, Insanity, where we really take on the thin line between being sane and being insane.
And there's not a lot that Fred and I have in common other than our appreciation for deep, authentic conversations with interesting people.
Yep, I'd say that too. I mean, we don't have that much in common, and deep, authentic conversations is one thing, but we have another thing in common, actually, Sam, don't we? I mean, we're nonconformists. There's nothing about us that's a whole lot like the other people who are supposed to be like us.
We are both able to really tear a hole in the fabric of normal conversations and bring in topics and themes and questions that a lot of people simply aren't addressing these days.
Yeah, it really is. It's something that takes a toll on our brain. I mean, we start looking at like all the different ways that people manage life. And we start doing so by having these great conversations with respect, with compassion, with insight, with humor, really looking at what are our guests having to offer? What are they doing to get through this crazy world? What are they doing with their own sense of insanity?
Yeah, and one thing that you and I do better than just about anyone else is we are able to bridge the type of conversation that might happen in a lecture hall or in an intellectual circle, bridge those types of conversations with the average people out there who need to have these things broken down to them so these high level concepts can reach a much larger audience.
Yeah, I mean, from the lecture hall to the streets, right? Or from the mansion to the crack house, that's where we are, Sam. Each of us both entirely comfortable there. But whichever I am, I'm always asking the question, are we going insane? Are we going flipping insane? I mean, look around us. The world appears to be going insane, or at least it thinks it is, or maybe this is called sanity. What do you think, Sam?
Are we really living in a post-truth world? That's the question. Or is truth just struggling to catch up with how quickly things are changing? I mean, the structures and the institutions that we are so used to are all falling apart right in front of our eyes. So having interesting conversations and engaging these guests and being able to bridge that intellectual discussion with the average person is our goal.
Whoa, I am telling you, I feel that thing to my core. Every time I blow my mind, it hurts. It turns out that I blow my mind like several times a day. And really, what's happening here is that we really are like taking a peek at that thin line, that little razor's edge that lands in between sanity and insanity.
Yeah, when we put our heads together, the types of conversations that come out are just amazing. Everything from deep metaphysical conversations to super practical, myopic conversations and everything in between. And we talk about things from media to entertainment to technology to science. And we can go deep on a lot of these subjects and ask questions that other people simply aren't asking.
So each and every episode, we're going to treat you a little bit to our conversation because they really are fun. And we really do go on the far edges of different topics.
And one thing about you and me, Fred, is we are just normal guys, but we happen to be able to have high level discussions with a number of different themes.
Yep, exactly. With tenacity and with relentlessness and with fearlessness. I think our audience can expect you, Sam Morris, and me, Fred Moss, to take on these conversations in ways that are unexpected and maybe have never been done before.
I'm an experienced executive coach, and Dr. Fred is a board-certified psychiatrist for the past 30 years. He's been in that profession, and yet it's not really so much about our resumes on paper as much as our experiential education. Fred lived nomadically around the world and had engaged with people on whole different levels than a lot of people engage with people. Not your typical psychiatrist. I happen to be paraplegic for the past 21 years, so I've been through deep trauma, both psychologically and physically, that I bring to the table, and it's really created a really deep sense of humanity inside of me. So we bring some really interesting personal experience to the equation.
It turns out that Sam Morris and Fred Moss have a lot to say, and it's going to be really fun to share with you what we say to each other and even share with you what we get with our guests. It is with total privilege that I now announce my great and highest honor to work with Sam Morris in bringing you the Insanity Podcast. If you want to get a hold of us, the information is right down here. It's sure going to be a fun time, right, Sam? I can't wait.
I feel the same, Fred. I'm really excited about bringing insanity to you.
So, like I could redline a turn down game.
Nice.
It
is a true bromance in its finest form.
It is. What happened today? So we had a guest planned, I guess, and I was very excited about it. And I think I'm not going to name the guest just for the sake of this, but anyways, we had a guest, and it was going to be a spectacular conversation. I was going to learn so much and teach so much and listen so much and share with you. And bomb around some topics that are really meaningful to my heart and my brain. And I was like setting aside my whole world, letting the Red Sea part so we could have this conversation, and taking care of enough business so that we could cut out and carve out like an hour or an hour and a half for this conversation. And then then the guest isn't here. And that's probably, like me, I don't know about you, but I have it being that it's my fault for sure.
It is definitely your fault, Fred.
To a point.
No, it's entirely your fault. Yeah.
To a point.
Yeah.
I get that. I appreciate the confirmation. And now we're left with, well, since I fucked up, what are we going to talk about?
I think what we need to do is pretend that one of us is also the guest as well. And then we could have the listeners see if they can identify who it was that was going to be our potential guest based on one of us pretending to be the guest and answering the questions how we think the guest would answer them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty risky. And I fear that. I fear that we would say something that he or she wouldn't like so much. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know you're probably right.
But you know what I could do?
Outside of the safety zone.
I think we could do a nice throw off on that, though. I could be a guest of my own creation, and then you could interview me until you get which guest I am. But you know what? That's pretty elementary too. So how about if we just introduce our audience to each other?
Great.
How about we do that? So
let's do it.
So, what is this insanity shit that we're up to? What is this thing really? What do we think we're doing?
Well, the way I see it, the way I see it, Fred, is you and I have both been through a lot of personal insanity in our lives, and we are now navigating a world which is increasingly insane. And, if I was to sort of kind of draw a general picture of at least where I feel like I'm coming from and where I sense that you're really coming from knowing you as well as I do, is that you and I, maybe more than your average person have kind of always been aware that the world is totally insane. And we looked around us. I think this was one way that we can really relate to each other, that we looked around us and we saw a world that thought that it was sane, that had this notion that things were pretty normal and pretty sane. But I think going back as far as adolescence for both of us, we were looking at the world through this lens of going, wait, everyone's fucking crazy. What is going on here? This is fucking crazy that people think this way and that they behave this way. I mean, what the hell? And yet it took a few extra decades for the rest of the world to start to catch up to the fact that, whoa, maybe we are a little crazy. Maybe we are a little bit off. Maybe reality is not quite as stable as we had made it out to be. And so I think you and I are in this interesting position of kind of going, hey, told you so. and now we want to share.
It is like I told you so.
Yeah. Told you so. Hey, you made fun of me back when I was...
now we want to share what? Our comfort with insanity?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, come check out this world. We've been living in this world for a while now. The world of instability. Come join us in our little pod of instability, if you will. Mm-hmm. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, there's something you're saying which is really interesting. Yeah, there's something you're saying that's really interesting about that there is a stability. It just isn't anything like the stability that was manufactured by those who think that they're sane.
Ooh.
So in other words, there is a pattern. There is a pattern of... Yeah. There's a pattern, it seems, about how things go, how they've gone, how they're going to go. And it is much more broad and perhaps more multidimensional than the apparent really myopic, very constricted and restricted pattern of living that humans have acquired, or that our little circle of American humans perhaps are have acquired to sort of imply that if you're on that track, then you're sane, and if you're outside of that track, you haven't yet caught up to sanity. So there's like a manufactured pathway that looks sane, or that has been described and agreed upon to be so-called sane, and it seems like my real question, Sam, is have people really like drank the Kool-Aid, drank the Kool-Aid? Are they really thinking that they were once sane, or really what happened is that they were force-fed sanity and just worked as hard as they could to swallow the whole thing, hook, line, and sinker, the definition of sanity that has been, implied as being, the standard. I think the word you used was stability, that life isn't that at all. And we really are all getting a nice bolus now that is not what life is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if we want to look at it through the level of sort of agreement, what I would look maybe the way I might paint this picture is kind of an unconscious agreement, that there's this kind of collective agreement around reality that we have as a culture, that you kind of, people tend to conform to at some point or another. They might question it for a while, maybe when they're kids and they start smoking dope and maybe taking some drugs, and they start going, wow, reality's different than I thought it was, or it's more flexible. Reality's more flexible, or maybe the conventions that I just kind of assumed were reality actually aren't reality. Maybe it's just more of something that people just kind of somehow conform to. But then most people, they grow up, they kind of do their thing, they start their family, and then they repeat a lot of the same patterns. And I think a lot of it is to sort of protect the known, to try to protect the known, because there's this instinct in all of us, this biological evolutionary instinct to try to protect a known reality, to make things as comfortable and as safe as possible. And I think that in doing so, we inadvertently prevent ourselves from opening up to the fact that maybe this construct of reality is fragile and not even something worth adhering to in the first place. I think that a lot of people just depart from that. If they have maybe a taste of some alternative form of reality, they tend to depart from that as they get a family and get a job and go through life and start to structure their lives around what they feel like is a known safe space to reside in.
Beautiful point. I wonder, I wrote down what you wrote, like protecting the known, and it really is protecting the known at all costs. Like once it comes down, and of course we're using the word known loosely. What I think I know is what I'm describing as know. I mean, we all fall into the spaces that we think we know something. So we protect that as if it's going to create security. And then when we are introduced to that breaking down, perhaps that reality just simply, totally, absolutely just disintegrates and breaks down. That's one way that the reality, and that might not be don't let the facts get in your way. Basically, this is like people are still, even if all of reality breaks down, people are still absolutely willing to continue to support the reality that they know for themselves. Yeah. I think one thing that we did is we departed from that earlier on than most, and have already considered it. Once you get that there's even one separate reality or one possibility of a different explanation for how life goes, then for me, the floodgates open, because I could see that if there was one different one, there could be many different ones.
Yeah.
And the search was on to find one that was more preferable, or perhaps one that work to satisfy my curiosity of what the hell are we doing here anyway? Really, Sam, what the hell are we doing here anyways?
What the hell are we doing here anyways is really the question, isn't it? I mean, I think if you're not asking that question, you're kind of overlooking something really important. And I would add to what you just said by, looking at the fact that both of us had expanded well beyond the sort of traditional, well, let's just put it this way. You and I had both done a lot of psychedelics before our brains had fully formed. Let's just put it point blank. I'm not going to beat around the bush with this conversation. Something that our listeners should know about the Insanity podcast is Fred and I are not going to beat around the fucking bush. All right. Let's not beat around the bush. You and I had both done a lot of psychedelics before our brains were fully formed. And in that sense, it was like the floodgates were open before they got locked off, before it got dammed, And, by the age of 25, that's when our brains have fully formed. And from that point on, it's pretty damn hard to bring new information into that identity world that we call our reality. And, you and I, long before the age of 25, were blasting ourselves out to the far reaches of the universe. And that's one of the ways in which we connect as well as we do. I mean, we're from different generations. We have entirely different upbringings. And yet we connect on this level that is very rare and very special. And I think we can attribute a lot of that to the fact that we were both expanding beyond the known reality well before our brains were fully developed.
Well, I concur, and it is actually beautiful. Part of me is like embarrassed about it, and another part of me at this point is like, no, I'm not either embarrassed or proud. It's just really what occurred. There I was, and it wasn't just psychedelics. But it was without a doubt heavily influenced by psychedelic ingestion. But there was also other ways. I like to hitchhike. I like to, whenever my mom would say, "Don't cross 9 Mile" or something. Fred, you can go for a bike ride, but don't go past Kipling Avenue. It's like, okay, Mom. And then that day I would be for sure, absolutely past Kipling Avenue. What is it that she's telling me I can't see? And that's really the question. What is it that you're telling me that I don't have access to? I'm willing to not have access to it, but only after I see what it is that I'm agreeing not to see.
Yes.
And it is in that exploration that I think we meet. There's like, this shit isn't working.
Nonconformist to the core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, right? I mean, what's the point of just conforming to something that doesn't work?
Absolutely. And I would add to that, nonconformist with a healthy respect for and compassion for what we might call the ordinary as well. There's a lot of nonconformists who are just kind of like, well, fuck you. I'm not going to take your reality isn't my reality. I'm a sort of a rebel without a cause. And then they kind of go off and isolate themselves, to taking that turn on, tune in, drop out thing and taking it to an extreme as a nonconformist. No judgment against that, but that's not the path that you and I took. You and I took what I feel is a more integrated path in our lives. You as a professional psychiatrist, me as an executive coach. So we play in both worlds. We're bridging the world of the ordinary known, excuse me, ordinary known acceptable, or I should say accepted sort of default reality, and this nonconformist attitude and perspective. And so I think that's something that really does, where that's another connection point for us, is that we are bridging those two worlds between what is the traditionally accepted reality and asking questions that maybe don't get asked very often because we're also on a soul level nonconformists.
Sam, one of the things that's coming up as you say this is the idea that that in this accepted reality, in the agreement model of what maybe reality has been up until now, anyways, for most people, like you're outside of the box and you're abnormal. There are certain sets of concerns and fears and discomforts and confusions and disempowering disempowering contexts that end up being created if you accept the parameters of the generally accepted prevailing agreement of what reality is. There's a certain set of concerns and fears that arise from that and then arise collectively. And because they arise collectively, it seems like there's then agreement that those fears and concerns are real too.
Right. It
So,
sort of
not only do I come up with a
legitimizes them.
certain fear,
Yeah.
it does. All I
Yeah.
really need is one person to agree with me, and I'm good to go that I have something that's actually worth considering.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Exactly.
if I have thousands or tens of thousands or millions of people who agree that this is just simply what's so, well, then I won't even question that. That just becomes something that's what's so. And I believe when you say that we ventured out before our brains were developed, that we were already asking to a deep-rooted core. There was, for me anyways, it was like something is so here. Something is so. It's just not what's being fed to me.
Yeah.
I mean, something is so,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not this.
Yeah.
And I might as well go find out what the hell are they talking about.
So if I'm going to invite you now into examining some of those commonly held presuppositions that people commonly hold and are agreed upon enough that it creates a sort of a collective fear that sort of validates sort of truisms
All right.
that get passed on sort of as memes in our culture. Do you want to do that a little bit?
All
I'll
right.
start.
Yeah, I got one for you.
Please.
No, you got one too. If you got one, roll
Well,
it out. I got
sure,
one
sure.
for
I was gonna start with something like, if you are in debt and you have a job that you hate, but it's at least paying you a paycheck, that it's stupid to quit that job and you should stick with that job until you get out of debt and ideally until you become quote unquote comfortable. That seems to be something that is sort of an agreed upon. There's enough people out there who would agree upon that stance that it's pretty hard to get yourself out of that particular stance without really stepping outside of what the culturally accepted norm would be.
That is a brilliant one. This idea of keeping a job that I hate just long enough to get out of debt, but no, even then somehow comfortable, which is certainly seems like it's kind of impossible to become comfortable if every day I'm doing something I hate.
Right. Comfortable
But,
in your
that
pain.
I would get financially comfortable. Comfortable in the waste of time that I'm pouring into my life. There's like, well, yeah, that is one way to do it, but what does it take? What does it take to quit a job or to quit being someone I can't stand?
Yeah. What does that take?
Like if I really, what does that take?
Ooh, and it's occurring to me right now how much reinforcement that gets through people reinforcing that, boy, life really sucks. Well, no, I get it. I get it. Yeah, no, your job sucks. You just got to do it. You got to, of course, I'm adopting some kind of accent there, so I'm clearly being prejudiced in some way. But yeah, your job sucks. Just stick with it though, because this is just life. This is just the way it is. And that gets really reinforced too. That life is supposed to suck. That work is supposed to suck. that debt is just a normal reality for people. All of these things, when they get, you could see people sitting around at the bar together and sort of agreeing upon this as being just the way it is. And so then that reinforces that as an inescapable reality.
Hmm. And well, why would I? There's something about debt that you said, so debt comes in many forms. I'm sure we're talking primarily about financial debt.
Mm.
And for me, I'll tell you, for the last 40 years, I've been in debt, most 39 years of them. And I recently looked at how that occurs. And most of what I've been doing in my work for the last 30 years has been soul sucking and soul sacrificing at a very deep level. And when my debt would hit me or I needed to come up with bills, I would go back to work. I'd be like, damn, bite the bullet or just like, well, I get paid a lot of money as a psychiatrist, so I can be a lot in debt and then come out of debt. I play with an extra zero probably than what most of the citizenry of America plays with. But I still, 20 to 40% sometimes of my yearly earnings is about my debt. And I get to a point where I'm starting to take, like, I'm current with my bills, like it's not that I don't owe, but I'm making regular monthly payments. And now there's not the same pain to pay my bills. I don't,
Mm.
like, I got my bills. I'm paying them. It is some sort of minimum payment. But now the cost benefit analysis of working no longer works for me. So I quit my job. Like, I screw this. I don't have to do this shit anymore. So I stopped working at my job because this is a good time to look for another job. And then, if it takes me a little long or I end up just, staying up late or not paying attention to whatever I'm going to do with my life that is aligned with me, then the same cycle happens over and over again. Before too long, there comes my debt. There comes the people I owe money to. There comes the people, who are looking down at me for not only being in debt, but for being in debt and unemployed. And in some ways, the pressure breaks, like the levee breaks, and I got to go back to do a job. I choose to go back to do a job that is totally soul sucking. And that for me, that's my cycle that I've been living for the last 4 decades or 5 decades, really.
Now, you're bringing up something really interesting that I bet a lot of listeners can really relate to. And I want to dive in here. And this is a subject that we could really explore in depth. There's a whole rabbit hole here. Ooh, is this Daniel Pinchbeck calling? I guess I just let the rabbit out of the bag with our potential guest.
You did.
Here, let me grab it. Howdy.
Hey, apologies. I guess I'm a little bit late for this.
No worries. You want to follow that link and jump on with us?
Yeah. How long do you want?
We can reschedule, Sam. I got to get off.
It sounds like Fred has
reschedule.
to get off. So it sounds like
I have 35 minutes. If he has 35 minutes,
you want to hop on with us?
Is that the best way to do this, or should we do it another day?
Would that be preferred for you, Fred, or should we do it another time? What do you think? I think we're going to want to.
You know what? It's going to be. I really want. I think so. He's too brilliant. It's too. I have so much to say that yeah.
I feel like we'd only be scratching the surface with 35. So yeah, let's find another time. No worries at all. Let's just reschedule. Find another time. All right, I'll text you. Bye.
All right, Ryan. This last minute and a half. Go ahead and edit out. Just pull off the phone call and Sam and I are going to go right back to the can of worms or the rabbit hole that I'm going down. So just pull out the pinchback contact right out of this video, if you will. Okay, Sam, back to you.
Okay, so we're going to dive in here right away. This is awesome because what you just put a voice to is amazing. And I think that the implications of what you were speaking to go so deep. And I think a lot of our listeners are going to get this. So when you were talking about debt, you were tying it together with self-esteem. And the way in which being in debt in this culture almost automatically creates this feeling of a lower self-esteem than you actually deserve. That there's a feeling of, well, now you owe someone more important than you. So now there's someone who is the debtor who has loaned their generous money to you, and they're more powerful and they have more authority than you, and they can put you in jail if you don't pay. So now they have power over you. And so now you should feel ashamed of yourself. I mean, if you think about, here's an example. You go to the bank, you want to apply for a credit card, if someone, if that banker looks at your credit score and it's 800, hey, you're doing great. Here's a great card we can give you that has awesome incentives. You'll get X number of miles. And, do you want to apply for a low interest home mortgage as well? All that kind of stuff. If you go in and they look at your credit score and it's low, they're going to, hush, hush, turn the screen as, you might not want to look at this, but, yeah, unfortunately, we are not going to be able to accept your credit card application. It's like, shame on you, motherfucker. You're in debt. You must be a lowly part of the world. You must be sucking from the teat of this capitalist system and not paying back what you should be paying back. And so there's this unconscious, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the agreement that our culture makes about reality, these agreements that we just kind of unconsciously accept, that there's something about someone who is in debt where they are somehow not as worthy or not as brilliant as someone who has plenty of money and has a high credit score. And I think this goes back to religious and philosophical traditions that are ages old, that are deeply embedded into our cultural unconscious, that would have the debtor feel sort of enslaved, or have the debtee, is that what a word, debtee, the person who is in debt, have them feel enslaved to the
indebted
who is indebted, to feel enslaved in their indebtedness to the person who is providing the help. But now it's not even a person, it's institutions. These institutions that have infinite amounts of money to loan, that are now the power, seen as the power or the authority that decides, what kind of a person you are based on your level of personal wealth or lack thereof. And the way in which that insidiously affects our sense of self-esteem is just tragic, because I can feel it without even you talking about it. I can feel, and I think this is also because I know the feeling myself, the feeling of, oh, fuck, man, I just don't feel worthy. I don't feel, feels like there's a lack inside of me when there has been debt. And that then influences one's sense of identity in this horrible way that is completely arbitrary. Who says that anyone in debt should feel any lesser than the richest person in the world? That's a culturally imposed, insidious energy.
Yeah. So this is an excellent example of one of the fears or one of the concerns that rises out of this agreement reality that we're talking about. It's like, no one really says out loud, if you're, maybe some do, but it's not a known conversation that if you're in debt, you're worse of a person, or you're less reliable, or you're less of a, you're more of a creep, or you're, not risk worthy. And, if you get your shit together, maybe you'll come out of debt. So that concern and that fear arises. And then we think we need money, and we sort of kind of do need money. And, we're left with either choosing, there's a lot of jobs out there that you could get paid to do stuff that you hate doing. In fact, that's a lot of the society. You could get paid a lot of money to do stuff. You can get paid enough money to do stuff that you hate doing. That's why they pay you to do it. I mean, if you were going to do it anyways, then they don't have to pay you. So they give you money because, you will then be incentivized to do something you don't like doing. Well, the money question or the debt question then sort of takes on a life of its own over the years. It's like, well, how can I find, like an ultimate question is, how can I live this life in a way that is satisfying to me and have all my resources?
Yeah.
It's like somehow those two things don't work together.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. It's funny because I think that having this conversation now, if this was the type of conversation that was normally had, we might be able to look at this and go, wait, that's bullshit. I'm not going to agree to feel lesser than. I'm not going to agree unconsciously to have my self-esteem lowered by my lack of financial resources. Because it's the insidious nature. You mentioned a good word, that it's sort of unspoken. It's not something that people talk about and wouldn't necessarily consciously acknowledge. And that seems to me that that's part of the problem, is people don't consciously acknowledge the lie. Instead, it's through little subtle, insidious things like the banker whispering to you rather than getting excited about your credit score. Why is that banker not completely neutral whether you have a high credit score or whether you have a low credit score? Why don't they treat you like the same person no matter what your credit score? Maybe some do. I'm not saying that all bankers are the same, but I'm saying that this is a common thing that we see, is that there's a certain what's the words? Sort of a cognitive bias, a certain judgment that tends to exist, that has people, at least in this culture, if they have more money, they tend to be more celebrated. And if they have less money, they tend to be less celebrated and thought lesser of. We don't necessarily speak to it because I think that we're both embarrassed to have the conversation and also embarrassed about the subject of the conversation. And so I think that laying it all out, putting cards out on the table, I'm hoping that, whoever's listening to this, watching this, whatever, is able to look at this and say, okay, am I agreeing on some level to believe the cultural nonsense that there's something either better about me if I have money or worse about me if I don't? And if so, what do I want to do about that?
Yeah. Well, you bring up, the power gradient of what is it that I have to go through? I could be put in jail for not paying my bills, or I could be, they could send the hitman after me for not, covering my debt, or, I become afraid, less than, and contracted when I'm walking through life with, looking for what works, but at the cost of not making money by doing something I can't stand. So, yeah, that's one place. This money conversation, this money conversation certainly arose out of the society's agreement realities, and it doesn't even serve the wealthy well. The wealthy are inappropriately given greater respect, so that when they say something about something that has nothing to do with money, they are heard as if they have something to say about it. So, celebrities tell you which tissue paper to buy, and you agree.
It's so true. It's so true. Wow, you're beautiful and rich. I'll believe anything that you endorse.
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting. The next one I want to bring up, you bring up, so I think we'll let's see if we can tie this one in.
Yeah.
It's only changing a couple words from the word debt. And you and I have talked about this, but I talked about it in my men's group earlier today, which is this inherent terror of the only thing in life that is definitely inevitable. There's only one thing. It's not two things. It's one thing. There's one thing in life that's inevitable. There's one thing that is absolutely, inarguably going to occur, or will occur in this life, and that, of course, is death rather than debt. And our
Death and
understanding of
taxes.
this idea that death is death. Well, they say death and tax. I heard that the taxes thing was added in the Lincoln administration.
Oh, interesting.
Because people weren't paying their taxes, but they all knew there was only one thing too. But they threw that in as a propaganda to get people to pay their taxes.
Yeah. Little extra pressure.
Because there's a lot of people who don't pay their taxes and then they die.
That's true.
So it's not, but it doesn't go the other way around. There's not people who pay their taxes and don't die.
Yeah,
It's like,
unless
really a real thing.
unless there's some sort of interesting thing that we don't know about Walt Disney or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's true. So why am I so afraid of the only thing in life that is fully and totally guaranteed? Why is that the most terrible thing that we can imagine in this world, is someone or me dying? When in fact, it is the only inevitable outcome of this lifetime. It could happen in 1 second. It could happen in 30 years or 50 years, or who knows. And why is it that I'm trained to know that that is the worst, most frightening, terrible, possible outcome known to life? What the hell is that, Sam?
Because you're not going to be able to have your tchotchkes anymore.
No tchotchkes.
No tchotchkes.
I can't afford tchotchkes anyways.
When you're dead, no tchotchkes.
I can't afford them because I don't have a job. Yeah.
When you're dead, no, warm apple pie. I don't know. I mean, it's very, very odd. Yeah. Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti, the Indian philosopher, he has some incredible writings on the subject of death. If you Google Krishnamurti on death or something along those lines, you'll find some really interesting writings on the topic of death. And one of the things that he said, which really resonated with me, is that people don't really know what death is. That we have this idea of death, but the idea of death is not the real death. And so, to expand on that from his perspective, what he talks about the idea of death is he says that the problem is we are mistaking life for continuity. We look at our lives through this linear perspective of continuity, the continuity of our family structure, the continuity of our bank accounts, the continuity of those objects that we bought when we were a kid that we're still holding on to, the continuity of our job or our career. And we're looking at the world through this linear lens of continuity and saying, this is life. Continuity is life, mistaking those things that are continuous with life itself. And his objection to that was, he said, that's not actually life. That's a time-based continuity perception that is just an aspect of how the mind works. The mind is basically calculating what seems to be in the material world consistent from day to day, and assuming that those things that are consistent equate to life itself. And what we're actually fearing is the end of continuity when we say that we're fearing death. So how does that sit with you?
Fascinating, especially when you start getting out to the edges and realize that that's a made up agreement reality, that continuity, that really what we're fearing or what we're concerned with. That, I guess what you're implying is that death is the termination of continuity, like things somehow stop at
Mm-hmm.
death,
Mm-hmm.
like the flow stops
Mm-hmm.
at death.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's really interesting about that is this notion of stopping, like the end of anything, is also made up.
Mm-hmm.
So, where did we get off thinking that at the very least, death stops the flow of continuity? It's like maybe, who knows, but I have an idea that death doesn't stop the flow of continuity. It might recreate it in a different realm or something, but I don't have it that I don't have to agree that it stops continuity. And it's entirely possible that what's waiting for us on the other side of death is even, and dare I say it, it's like, well, you don't want to be a heretic about it, but it might even be preferable to what we have here. It's very possible, of
Sure.
course, that it's even more continuous and more transparent and more beautiful than what
Sure.
we have
Sure.
here.
I mean, this particular, physical incarnation requires a ton of maintenance, and there's a lot of repetition involved. To me, the
Mm-hmm.
repetition can be a bit,
Mm-hmm.
challenging at times. There's a lot of pain involved. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of challenge involved in
Mm-hmm.
any physical life. Just maintaining this body and maintaining this mind in the material natural world is it's a lot of challenge. That's a lot of enduring that we have to do, and especially as we age, doesn't get any easier as we age too. So yeah, Alan Watts said that what we see as death is more like an interval. He described it as an interval, just like uh, winter is an interval between the seasons of fall and the season of spring. There's an interval, and
Mm-hmm.
and I like that. I like that a lot. That there's an interval rather than a specific end. There's a movement that
Mm-hmm.
occurs. Now, how we can know what that movement looks like, I think it's in that anxiety around the anticipation of what that looks like that creates that sense of fear. It's the anxiety of the not knowing what that interval actually may or may not look like that creates that anxiety. But what if we can transmute that anxiety? What if we can laugh about that anxiety rather than have it turn against us in the form of fear?
Mm-hmm. One thing it does appear that does happen is if we equate ourselves as simply this bag of bones we call our body and then call us, like, who are you? I am this, 6'3", under 200 pounds today, by the way. Yay.
Strikingly
3,
handsome.
197. What?
Strikingly
What?
handsome.
Oh,
Strikingly
thank
handsome.
you. And it's
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So what if I consider myself to be this body and nothing less, and all this other stuff is just a fluffy accessories of this thing called me that's my body? I think we can hold it true that death certainly stops our body in its tracks. I mean, that's the definition of death. When your body is no longer, functioning or moving or, carrying on its daily activities, either voluntarily or involuntarily, other than to begin to, I suppose, to disintegrate. So the body stops at this point called death. But even that, Sam, and we start looking at, well, that's how death got described at that moment, as if that's the end of something, but it's really in the unknown that has everybody so totally freaking crazy about this concept of death.
Yeah.
Everyone is crazy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would extend that craziness to even looking at it through lenses that we might not traditionally look through. What I mean by that is, I think sometimes it can hide itself in insidious ways where someone might say, "Hey, I'm not afraid of death." I'm living life to my fullest. I'm going to accomplish all these kinds of things. Well, isn't that coming from another fear of death? That sort of ambition,
Yeah.
I'm going to prove myself. Well, for what? For what? Why? Oh, because you're afraid of leaving this earth without having proved yourself. So, I think it hides. It hides in certain ways, like with this sort of a notion that one needs to leave behind a destiny. Why? Is life actually asking that of you? Or is there something inside of you where there's a deeper fear that if you don't leave behind a destiny, somehow you're going to be judged poorly? I'm not saying I have the answer to that, but I'm certainly dubious about that intention a lot of the times. It's like, okay, where's all this ambition coming from? And why is it so important to leave your mark? Is this just the fear of death in another disguise?
People really are. I love what you're saying. People are really. One of the men in my group this morning, the reason why this came up, or at least in the entryway, was that he had just got. He's from England, or maybe Scotland, and he had just come back from a funeral at just then. So he was talking about the impact of death on the people at the funeral. And then people started talking about their parents, and their parents left before they were able to, resolve some particular conflicts. And then there's, the fear of our own death, that we're not living up to our own standards, or we're not taking good enough health. There is, good enough care of our health. It's like, people are absolutely willing to kill. I think, Daniel might have brought this up today, but people are completely willing to kill themselves in order to avoid dying.
Yeah, totally. There's the irony. It's like this level of suffering that people are willing to endure in order to avoid the inevitable, which cannot be avoided. Is the irony is just absurd.
It's like the ultimate absurdity in all of existence. Exactly. It really is. I know. So part of this for me is that I'm looking at this upcoming journey that I'm taking, this upcoming initiation that has me prepared to really look at this square down the barrel as best as this human can, like really look at dying in order to create space for the life that's waiting for me on the other side of that, of the death function, like really killing off that which isn't working, that I have been clinging to for this lifetime, and really taking a good hard look at that, and then replacing that with things that are, I hope anyways, I pray, replacing that with things that allow for greater groundedness, satisfaction, contribution, usefulness, perhaps purpose, these things that seem like they would be desirable qualities to upgrade and purify, and then so that's just coming around the corner. So in order for me to walk voluntarily through that, I need to be cool with even during this conversation, I need to be cool with the idea that life as I know it, I mean, just being able to describe this doesn't keep us exempt from being in the same freaking shithole as everybody, is the life as I know it is about to come to an end. The life as I know it is about to come to an end. And can I be good with that? And
is that true, or is that so? I'm not disbelieving you, but I want to challenge that. Is it true, or is there some part of that might be a melodramatic sort of ego projection of some sort?
I'll let you know afterwards. But I have this attention. I think there's probably some melodrama there.
Do you
And
want to
really what I
elaborate
want to
on this?
do is
So,
I want to throw.
yeah, why don't you elaborate
Yeah,
on this a little bit so our
I
listeners don't think you're about to jump off a bridge or some shit like that?
no, not jumping off a bridge. I'm going on an initiation from June 10th to June 13th. There's no overt suicidal activity at all, and in this initiation, I'm going to be partaking of a particular substance from the Amazon that allows me to take on my own purpose of life. I mean, that's what it's touted to do. I'll be in very good hands, extremely safe environment, and the opportunity is take a big, cold, hard look at the things I've been holding as true, which then supposedly will come up for review and be able to be altered or transformed into being more consistent with the man I want to be, or the man I'm creating myself to be, or the future man that I can be, that isn't entirely held back and restrained by all these things that we are speaking to today that otherwise get in the way of my own growth and development. So there's that, and it's a 4-day immersion into nature where the promise, and I'm pretty sure it's reasonable, is that I will walk away from that quite a bit different in how I look at life than how I look at life upon arriving there. So that'll be next week, actually, next Friday.
So if during our next podcast you see an iridescent purple lizard instead of the Fred that you're accustomed to, you can know what happened. Sort of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's more of a green frog, but the purple lizard or a green
frog, purple lizard. Yeah, I could see you coming back as some sort of frog lizard hybrid or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy to host a show with a frog lizard hybrid, a purple iridescent frog lizard hybrid. I think that would be pretty cool.
Well, we have a couple shows between now and then, but I think afterwards that really is going to be your burden of life now that you said it. So we'll see how that goes. Sam, I gotta fly. I got something going on here. Is there anything?
This has been fun.
We've talked about it.
No, this has been fun. This has been good. Yeah, I mean, the subjects we explored today, we could just keep on diving down further, Ben. But I hope they are thought provoking to some people. And it's always, it's a pleasure to be jamming here with you, Fred.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a deep pleasure. It's a deep pleasure to be exploring the interface between saneness and insanity. And, off we go. It's like off to go take care of some of these earthly chores so that I can then wonder what the hell I'm doing about everything. So, but in the meantime, I might as well just, immerse myself in earthly chores. So.
None of it's going to matter in a week anyway. You're going to be dead, replaced by a lizard frog, an iridescent lizard frog.
Lizard frog.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So all of this is just your futile last, week of trying to pretend to be a human being.
Exactly. Well, here we go. Ribbit. And I'll talk to you next time, Sam. Let's we'll get Daniel on real shortly, and we have a few more guests this week. We have a couple even tonight, so we have we're ready to go. So let's rock this.
Love you, Fred. Talk to you soon.
Love you too.